Happy Friday. It's the Big Me Kickoff. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, and I want to welcome everybody for jumping in with me on this impromptu live show. Two in a week. That's pretty impressive if you ask me. Going from zero for a couple weeks to two. Already have a couple questions in the queue. So thank you everybody for joining me here on a Friday. Um, what's the weather like where you're at? It's finally warming up here in Columbus. The sun is out. I didn't freeze my rear end off going out taking the garbage to the street. It is trash day on Fridays here in Pickerington, so that's there. I'm not trying to use talking about trash days in Pickerington by bringing in our guest, but we have a very special guest, one Tony Gerdeman, and talk about just unfortunate timing, my friend. How are you doing today?
I was doing okay until I got that intro, but I'm not going to say it's not deserved after the way Tom treats you on Buckeye Weekly.
Yeah, I should probably start listening. And you should probably start listening to all of our great podcasts here on youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Of course, you can also find us on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. So let's get through a couple of the hellos, and we've already got some questions. We've got Antoine Johnson, who's involved, who is a big Michigan fan, who likes to debate about things and very civil. So I'm very, I like him, but thank you, Michael Sheeter. Good to engage today is right. Mika Hanna saying hello as well. We have El Suzabo. Morning, guys. How are you doing, Sue? And we have some laughter toward our introduction of Tony. But Tony, here recently over at Buckeye Huddle, you have knocked out some great pieces where you have done deeper dives on some of these incoming players. Why don't you tell everybody as they're getting on board some of the things that you've discovered and what they're missing out on?
Yeah, actually doing a couple of different series for all of the incoming freshmen, or trying to. It's not always easy, but talking to the high school coaches of each of the players, trying to get backgrounds on them when the coaches first came across these players and their development. And it's interesting to hear some of them talk about seeing them as youth football players, and then kind of having to stave off the recruiting that goes on in high school to get these players to come to their school when they're living in their area. And then also doing some that's one series, and I just dropped one with Jelani Thurman's head coach Daniel Boone Williams a couple days ago, and also doing about once a week a closer look from the high school highlights of players that are incoming. Done Brandon Ennis and all of the transfers. Jermaine Matthews dropped a few days ago, and working on Caden McDonald, the defensive tackle, today. Just cutting up some highlights, and then I see some of the stuff, and these are just junior and sophomore highlights because the senior highlights aren't on Huddle. But Kevin, I see him running around as a fullback a little bit as well, and I wouldn't mind going back to the days of the big fullback at Ohio State, a bigger Nikki Sualua, if you will.
And you're talking about Caden McDonald there.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yes.
that would be something. If you can't get him half a yard on goal line or something like that, of course everybody there is going to know. I mean, you're a Bears fan, but how much do you remember of what the fridge was able to do?
Well, the main thing I remember about that is Mike Ditka not getting Walter Payton a touchdown in the Super Bowl because they gave the fridge the ball. But that's very similar back then to now in terms of the big guy. It is crazy, and I was only like 9 years old, so I remember a little bit of it. I remember the fridge, the idea of him more than seeing him on the field, because he it was amazing that he was this big thing because he was a 300-pound defensive lineman. Like, they didn't exist back then.
Well, I remember watching it. I guess I was 13, going to turn 14 later that year, and I was very excited about it because of the novelty of the whole situation. I didn't really have a dog in the fight. I was like, Bears are fine. Who are these New England Patriots or whatever? Little I know, within a couple years, I would be moving to New Hampshire. So there you go. Let's get to a couple of questions here, and be sure to get your questions in. As you know the rules, we'll get to as many questions as we can. But if you are impatient or just really like us and want to get to the head of the line, hit that super chat button. But while you're at it, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell, don't miss a single episode, because I never know when I'm going to do a show. I guess it just depends on when I'm in the right headspace, which lately has been never. So, there you go. A little insight into me. Antoine Johnson, here we go. I think it's an interesting dynamic between Michigan and Ohio State. I think it's a dynamic of sports car versus pickup truck. It's a clash of two philosophies in power versus speed. I think that there's certainly been a lot made here recently that Michigan is going to do it a lot more power, a lot more blue collar, lunch pail, bloody up your nose, and Ohio State is kind of become a little bit more of a passing team. I think the numbers will show you that there is something to what Antoine is saying there. Is that, do you think that's a case of just complete philosophy, or is that a case of where Ryan Day is just kind of working with what he has and the pieces he has, and you can't necessarily, could this be a power team if you wanted it under its current personnel? I mean, obviously it would waste a ton of talent on the outside, but could they be a power team?
They would be wasting a bunch of talent on the outside. But I think in terms of them being a power team, when you look at what they've done in the Big Ten running the ball under Ryan Day, they've led the Big Ten in rushing, I think, twice. As in 2019, they did by a lot. In 2020, they did by 55 yards over the number 2 team. And they didn't in 2021. They were 4th. In 2022, they were 3rd. So and when you look at the average per carry last year, they were 2nd to Michigan. In 2021, they were 1st. So this idea that they aren't a power team or that they're soft or whatever, I think it stems a lot from the throwing, a little bit from the defense as well. But Ohio State has been able to run the ball, and so I don't. Sometimes I reject the premise about Ohio State's running game. Now, in terms of the build up, the development, the aspect of Michigan versus Ohio State and what they are designed to defeat, I kind of view it as Michigan football is built to win a demolition derby. Ohio State football is built to win the cannonball run. And they're two different races. And yes, the team that is built to win the cannonball run is not going to do well in a demolition derby. I think Michigan is kind of built to beat Ohio State. Ohio State is built to win a national championship. I don't see Michigan in this context and this year or anytime moving forward really having a shot at a national championship.
Yeah, I mean, I think that once we move to 12 teams that, some things could change up a little bit in terms of, matchups and getting hot at the right time and everything else, but that, Michigan is certainly built as a team that has a lot of advantages in Big Ten play, but how does that work against the SEC? I mean, and I'm not even going to try and take a shot and talk about, the TCU game and everything there and what went wrong in that situation. It's just, I remember an era where every Jim Tressel team was built to dominate the Big Ten, and then you get out of the Big Ten, and there was such a contrast in styles and contrast in philosophies and just contrasts of where Ohio State had a lot of issues outside of league play. And I don't know if I see it as dramatic, in terms of where maybe Michigan is right now in some instances, but I think that we sit there and we look at a couple of plays in a small vacuum. We look at the 5 plays in the one game that really led to the situation. We look at a couple of Donovan Edwards touchdowns that, Ohio State had to basically go for broke and went broke on those plays. And we sit there and, those 160 yards happened. There's no denying it. There's no, oh, I'm closing my eyes, I didn't see it. It didn't happen. It happened. But I think that the debate of the toughness or in such is something that probably makes more rounds in the fan circles than it does inside the team rooms at the Woody and at Schembechler Hall.
I also think people close their eyes to the fact that Ohio State was, down by 1 score in both of those games in the 4th quarter, and things got out of hand for sure. But it wasn't just a constant blowout either team either time. Antoine Johnson talking about the weather in Ohio State wanting to use the tight end a bit more. That last year with Cade Stover is the most they've thrown to a tight end since Ricky Dudley in 1995, and they do want to play a bunch of 12 personnel, 2 tight ends and 1 back as much as they can. But when you do that, you're also removing one of the receivers, one of the 3 receivers, and they've gone back and argued about this. Like internally, it just depends on where the personnel is as well. You lose Jackson Smith and Jigba out of the slot, so now there becomes this. Well, we have an opportunity for more tight ends, but they didn't have the. I don't think they had the depth or the quality of tight end that they really wanted last year that they had with like Luke Farrell blocking, Jeremy Rucker running routes. I think they're trying to get back to that if they can. But then also, is that one of the reasons Caleb Brown transferred? In terms of he's a slot receiver, his numbers are going to be difficult to happen at Ohio State this year anyway. But with the 12 personnel, with Emeka Ibuka, with Xavier Johnson, with Marvin Harrison running some in the slot, like the ability to play 12 personnel just depends on who that second tight end is, really.
Yeah, a couple of points I want to make there. One, you sit there and Mitch Rossi is your second tight end, and he's not your traditional tight end. He's more of a, I don't know, I'm going to call him a fullback.
Yes.
More of a fullback there. So now you go to a situation where it's Cade and Joe Royer, it's Cade and who steps up. We all have a lot of admiration for what Jelani Thurman looks like out there, but he is a true freshman. There are a lot of tight ends in that room. It may be difficult for him to get into that spot. You would assume that in terms of seniority, maybe it's Royer, but Sam Hart, Bennett Christian. I mean, what does that room end up looking like, and how much 12 does Ohio State have to run if it's not really thrilled with where offensive tackle is? I mean, that's going to dictate a lot of things. And then the pop shot I wanted to make is Caleb Brown transferring to Iowa, Brian Ferentz system. What kind of numbers is he going to put up there?
Well, I think Cade McNamara is an upgraded quarterback. I don't think he's a quarterback who led a Big Ten team to the playoffs. So, like, there's something to be said for that. You get Eric All there. You've got Luke Lachey as well. So I think there's some passing game there, but can Brian Ferentz call a legit offense? And can we call Iowa a legit offense? I think if Caleb Brown wants the ball, he's going to get it there. And they've had some guys in the past that have put up some good numbers. That was a long time ago, but I hope they use him a lot. I hope he gets used as much as he wants and in more ways than just catching the ball. However, the concern I have for him is Iowa loves to play 12 personnel. Caleb Brown is a slot receiver. Like, he's going to have to play on the outside, I think, or, they'll have twin receivers to the left and he can play in the slot there. Like, he's not done a lot of the outside stuff. So I think there's going to be some just growth that needs to happen there.
Tony, bringing back the days that Darrell Johnson-Culiano said Iowa of prolific receivers. If Charlie Jones couldn't get it done at Iowa, and then he goes and does what he does at Purdue, but
DJK should have been a Buckeye.
Well, I have my feelings on that one too. I do. Anton, we'll get to some of your stuff as later on. We're going to kind of mix in some other questions. Mika Hanna, why hasn't Reggie Powers committed? To me, it sounds like it's a case of, hey, everybody, let's just slow down here a little bit. Let's just slow down, and we got a ways to go. And Reggie's out there taking some visits and picking up some more offers, but I still like Reggie Powers being in this class. Just maybe not yet. Maybe not yesterday.
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one, but the fact that he's still visiting others is interesting as well, because now it's like sounds like he was willing to wait. And now it's like, well, while we're waiting, I'm going to go browse the rest of the selections.
Kay Simon, Ohio State would have never beat Miami if it was all about talent.
Look at the talent on that team, Kevin. You know this. Like, look at all the NFL draft picks from the Buckeyes on that team.
I know. I mean, but the Miami team was stacked. I mean, they'd already, we can go and relive history. We knew where the party was going to be, all of that good stuff. and fate intervened on that one. Trying to jump around and just not hit all of the Antoine questions right off the bat. We got another Mika Hanna recruiting question. Do we keep all 3 running back commits in 2024? For those who are getting on board, let's see if I can remember all the names. Jordan Lyle, James Peoples, Sam Williams Dixon. And I'll jump in with recruiting just since I do a little more on that. Sam Williams Dixon is being brought in kind of more as an offensive athlete. He's a very good pass catcher as well. I'm talking about kind of maybe a little bit of a Xavier Johnson role. I'm not saying that Sam Williams Dixon is Xavier Johnson and vice versa, but kind of that Swiss Army knife role. Whereas with Jordan Lyle and James Peoples, those are your 2 true running backs. Let's not forget that Ohio State had to pull off the daily double of convincing Ezekiel Elliott that
Dontre Wilson.
Dontre Wilson, drawing a blank there, was an athlete, and convincing Dontre Wilson that he was a running back. And okay, maybe historically, maybe things didn't work out as well in terms of what Dontre Wilson's numbers were, but you have to kind of play that game sometimes.
I keep saying this. I'm looking forward to watching Sam Williams Dixon this year, local here in Central Ohio, to see how he is used. I assume he's going to be not solely, but mainly a running back for Pickerington. But then when he gets to Ohio State, what does he become? And I think I keep saying the usage of Xavier Johnson last year to me was fascinating and really exciting. Like 12 or 13 carries, 12 or 13 receptions, 12 or 13 kickoff returns. The irony is that Sam Williams Dixon is like the heaviest of the running backs in the class. Normally, the hybrid guy is the lightest, the most likely guy to end up in the slot. So I think there's, and I think I said it on Buckeye Weekly or the Buckeyes tomorrow morning, to drop all of to plug all more of the podcasts. But there's a little bit of going back to the future, I think, possibly with this H-back thing, with the Percy Harvin role or the Curtis Samuel role for some of these guys that you bring in. And I think they did a really good job with Xavier Johnson last year, and they found some things. So I would like to see them continue that. But, man, how do you get all of these guys snaps?
Well, that's going to be the thing. But you look at a room that's going to probably be without Travion Henderson, Mayan Williams, and Chip Trainum next season. So at that point, what your running back room would look like would be Evan Pryor, Dallin Hayden, and these 3 players. I mean, obviously, you could still have Wiltrell Hartson, who is a walk-on. You could, they have T.C. Caffey. They've got some guys that probably should be playing scholarship ball somewhere who are walk-ons. But we see these guys who do a couple years in the system and then go transfer elsewhere and have success and careers of their own at that point. So the thing is there's going to be 3 guys all bottlenecked together. But the nice thing is that you do have a year in terms of where the scholarships are, to where Pryor is going to be toward the end of his career. Hayden will be midway, getting toward the end of his career, and then you got 3 guys there. And I think that we know that you can run through your running back room pretty quick.
Yeah, and you need them all, and they needed them all last year. And then you end up having to move a linebacker over. You have to end up using Xavier Johnson, move him over from receiver. So, yeah, the more, and losing out on Mark Fletcher last year put them in a little bit of a bind as well. And so, they could lose three running backs after this season if even though everybody has one more year where they could come back. But that, how often do Ohio State skill athletes use every last bit of their eligibility?
Yeah, it's not often, and it's one of those things that we see certainly on message boards. Well, he has one more year of eligibility. He's 30. Well, I really want him back.
I'll be glad when the COVID year is gone.
Yes, it'll make it a lot easier for counting years and kind of knowing where scholarship stands or where a scholarship chart stands and everything of that nature.
After the season, you got players who announce that they're leaving early for the NFL, and then you also have players like, I'm coming back for my 6th year, and it's just, how many more announcements do we need?
Right. Well, you need an edit. You always need edit. Antoine Johnson asks, are you dissatisfied with Ryan Day? Do you think he's too heavy-handed toward the offense? It seems to be showing in recruiting. Well, right. Ryan Day is giving up play calling duties to Brian Hartline, or so he says, even though he's admitted that he finds himself kind of over with the offense a lot of times during practice. Yes, Ohio State's recruiting class right now is heavily weighted toward the offense. But I think some of that too is a result of the success of the offense. And I think that it's easier at this point, maybe to get some of these top 50, top 100 kids to say, I'm in doing this. Whereas maybe on the defensive side, while Ohio State did have some strides towards being better last year, at the end of the day, in the biggest situations, there still were some shortcomings. I think some of these kids are just going to be a little bit more difficult to pull, and it's going to take more time. I think that I know Michigan fans in the Michigan program feels very good about Aaron Scott, the corner out of Springfield, but I know Ohio State does too. I think that you could see Aaron Scott and Bryce West pop for Ohio State in the next 8 weeks. I think that once that happens, I think that you start to see some things on the defensive line. I think you start to see some things at linebacker, but a lot of these southern or a lot of these defensive players are going into recruit are in the South, are in Georgia and in the South. And those recruitments just a lot of times take more time. It's kind of just a result of what's going on there. Yes, I do think that everybody, if you sit there and say, okay, look at Ohio State, do you think offense or defense? Right now, and for the last several years, the answer is going to be offense, but it's still something that I think that they can, that it's when we get to the end of the recruiting class, once everything is in after the February signing day, I think Ohio State's recruiting class is going to look just fine. Is it going to probably still be a little tilted toward offense? Well, yeah, that's what happens when you land guys like Jeremiah Smith and Milan Graham and potentially Jeremiah McClellan and some of these other really highly rated offensive players. It's just a result. And I mean, I'm sure the detractors are going to say, "See, there's your evidence right there. There's your evidence. They're 50 points higher in terms of offense than defense." Well, that's also because they're recruiting so high on offense that it's hard to stay in that stratosphere on both sides.
Well, and they were on in that stratosphere on defense last year for most of the cycle, but they just couldn't close on the defensive linemen, and you lose those guys to NIL. And so you can do really well and feel really well and then still lose guys. And I think there's that aspect to it. There's the aspect of as Urban Meyer always said, the theory versus testimony. The defense is theory, the offense is testimony. The offense is getting guys into the league. The defense, you had how many starters did you have this year that last year that weren't drafted this year? Like that shouldn't be happening at Ohio State, not in that kind of number. And then you have everybody's in all of these defensive coaches, Tim Walton, Perry Eliano, Jim Knowles, in the second year rather of being at Ohio State, building relationships. Larry Johnson has been around forever, but he is being negatively recruited against because, well, he's not going to be there, for your
Yep,
entire
been there forever.
exact. So like you've got guys that are too new to have built a bunch of great relationships, and you've got one guy that has been around so long that everybody just tells you that he's not going to be there much longer. So you've got to counter those, and I think obviously the defense will. It's not like Ryan Day is just gobbling up offensive players in lieu of getting defense. They have certain numbers for each position. Like running backs, we can take this many. Like defensive linemen, we need to take this many. So it's not like they're not going to take 3 running backs and then not take somebody at defensive line because, well, we took too many running backs. They've got all of this planned out in terms of who they want. So even if it doesn't look like they're focusing on defense, they still have those slots to fill. They will hold those slots for players.
Yeah, they're not going to take 8 receivers because they can and just say, well, yeah, here you go. I mean, it's going to get sorted out. And as El Suzabo says, I'm not unhappy with Day, but our D recruiting isn't up to what I'd like. Not sure that Day has a lot to do with that. Get James Laurinaitis on the road. I mean, I again, I don't. I know that there have been times of where Keenan Bailey, before he was a positional coach, was able to go out on the road because somebody was either laid up
Mm.
or whatever. Maybe, maybe they got to sit there and find somebody and say that they just have real fear of flying for the next 6 months or whatever, and get Laurinaitis out there on the road. I mean, obviously that helped with a guy like Peyton Pierce. That's going to help with a guy potentially like Sammy Brown. There are a lot of guys that are going to really be drawn in by James Laurinaitis. Now, is James Laurinaitis going to be Ohio State's defensive Brian Hartline? Well, I guess we won't know until we get him in a position to where he can get out there and really be on the road. But, what say you to that, Tony?
I'm with a lot of people on this, because it becomes a James Laurinaitis versus Parker Fleming thing, basically, is what this is. And I'm so entrenched in my defense that it's okay to have a full-time special teams coordinator that at this point my legs have solidified to the ground and I can no longer get out of this argument. So I am here for the long haul. But also, you can have a full-time special teams coordinator that is not one of your 10 assistant coaches. And so I think that's how I am able to wishy-washy my way out of this. And yeah, I'm with you. Or, do you take Jim Knowles off the road? Is that, do you, like, can you take Parker Fleming off the road?
Are you hiding your DC if you do that? Are you hiding
Well,
your defensive coordinator if you don't let him
yes, that's
recruit?
what,
Because Ohio State for years hid Greg Sturara on recruiting, or just Greg really wasn't out recruiting. But even prior to that, they had to sit there and kind of deal with their goofy offensive line coach and kind of recruit around him.
yeah, I don't even know if you can take somebody off the road, but obviously if you could, you would take Parker Fleming off the road so that James Laurinaitis could go there. But I don't know that you can actually do that. But until I'm with you, you gotta let the peacock fly, right?
Amen. Amen. We'll stick with recruiting and defensive recruiting here. Whoops, I just hit the wrong button. There we go. Mika Hanna, do we land Tyrone Malone? That is a good question there. He's supposed to be visiting Miami this weekend. Miami certainly is not shy when it comes to NIL inducements. Tyrone seems to really like the opportunity of coming to play at Ohio State, but Ohio State probably will not get in a bidding war with Miami over Tyrone Malone, in my opinion. And I guess the biggest question is, how hard does Miami push? I mean, the fact that Miami is bringing him in on a visit means that they're very interested. John Ruiz, like their biggest donor, the Life Wallet guy, is having some corporate issues right now, if you will, and you got to wonder what kind of inducements Life Wallet's going to be able to throw at players in terms of NIL deals. I mean, how aggressive is Miami going to be there? You sit there and you saw the Cavender twins leave Miami. You got to wonder if maybe checks weren't clearing or something. I don't know. A lot to think of there. If you take everything at face value, Ohio State versus Miami, recruiting straight up in terms of development and potential and everything else, I like Ohio State in a landslide. When you throw in all of the other noise, I don't have a good read.
Yeah, it's anytime, and this is my thoughts on Miami. Anytime a player is interested in Miami, that player's thought process is a wackadoo. And so you can't predict it, because why would you go to Miami to, I mean, I understand why some people would go to Miami. And that's why I don't think Ohio State, nobody has ever lost somebody to Miami in terms of like, gosh, he would have been so great with us. It's like, once they go to Miami, they disappear. They cease to exist. They become just, they're in the background. And so if somebody wants to choose Miami over anything, just let them go. They weren't going to help you. That's really my thought. Like, that's why I say you don't lose anybody to Miami. If they go to Miami, you're never going to hear from them again. That they're going to be, just like who has done anything at Miami of recently that you're like, man, that guy would have been. Like, they go to Miami and they disappear. You never think of them again. It's like, they've been buried in the Pine Barrens.
Yeah, it's a mess. They're just not. I mean, and they go in and they get these transfers, and they're supposed. Oh, we're going to put this guy in our top 5 preseason Heisman list because he's going to Miami. He's going to have his opportunity, and nothing comes from it. And whether or not you believe that Mario Cristobal is the right coach now, I mean, there are a lot of people down there that are kind of buying on that, but I haven't necessarily seen it. I mean, I don't know what Miami's record was last year. I think they came on as of late toward the end of the season, but the ACC was pretty down last year. Now, Florida State certainly is a team that's trending upward. I think Clemson could be trending upward now that they've gone out of the family in terms of where they've gone in their coaching trees. But there's still just so much mediocrity and sub mediocrity in that conference that I have a really hard time getting excited about anybody coming out of the ACC, kind of even to my own detriment that I completely just dismiss them altogether, which is probably not the responsible thing to do either. But it's the ACC, fellas. It's the ACC.
Yeah, and I've seen. I'm with you. Like I said, is it wise? I don't know. It's worked this far. Ignoring Miami and just dismissing them. They were 5-7 last year, Kevin. I think 3-5 in the ACC. And just I think they're 0-3 against ranked teams. They were 7-5 the year before, so they're a 500 team over the last couple of years, which is pretty okay for them, I guess. To address this question, Justin Courtney, please, Tony, how is OSU better prepared to win a natty this season? I don't know that they are better prepared, but that doesn't mean Michigan is prepared. It can win one. Like, just because Ohio State might have a dip this year, and I don't know that they will, doesn't mean that Michigan is now suddenly you can't stop. You got to stop comparing Michigan to Ohio State. You've got to compare Michigan to Georgia and what it takes to win a national championship. Because does anybody actually think Michigan was going to do to Georgia what Ohio State was able to do to Georgia last year? No, it was never going to happen. And I think what does make Ohio State better suited to win a national championship is the explosive players on offense and defense being 2 years now, and that defenders being 2 years in that same defense now. I think that will help. But I still think it comes down to scheduling, playing at Michigan, the mentality that will need to take place for that game to be won by Michigan and for that game to be lost by Michigan. Like that, now Ohio State has lost 2 in a row. So at some point, this is where Michigan has to lose almost. It's not just about Ohio State being able to win. It's about Michigan doing something to lose. And I think Ohio State has done things to lose the game. And now it comes down to, will Michigan do some things to lose the game? And if not, then Ohio State really has to play their best game to beat them because, it's on the road. As we know, Michigan is a 3-point favorite in that game right now. So if you want to go ahead and get on that, it's basically what will be a toss-up, pick-em game on the neutral site, and it would be a 3-point favorite for Ohio State in the shoe. But being in the loudest stadium in the Ann Arbor area this year, it's going to be tough.
Not Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. You're just saying in Ann Arbor.
Right. And I'm not counting Ann Arbor High School.
Okay, yeah. Well, Pioneer, I don't know how loud it gets over there, but that's where we have to park. We have to park at Pioneer. Justin Courtney followed that out with, what position is Michigan not prepared to win the national championship this year? Michigan has no glaring weaknesses across the board, and they return the 5th most production.
Well, I would say, last year they had to hide J.J. McCarthy quite a bit. They didn't trust him to do a lot of the stuff. Threw 2 pick sixes in the playoff against a bad TCU team, which is why I think they were trying to hide him for much of the year, and they're very conservative with him. Can they afford to get out of that conservatism? And would, even if they can, even if J.J. McCarthy is ready for it, and I think he's a tremendous playmaker, will Jim Harbaugh allow himself to do that with the way his style is? And can J.J. McCarthy cut down on the mistakes? Is the depth on defense there? You losing DJ Turner at corner is not good. Will Johnson might be the best corner in the Big Ten. He's going to be a first rounder. Their first rounder at corner since Leon Hall back in 2007 ish. So they've got that. I don't think the defensive line is really much of anything. We'll see what the linebackers are. You've got the transfer from Nebraska coming. I always have an issue with Michigan's depth all over the place, and I don't know that they're, how explosive are they on offense with the passing game? How explosive do they need to be? They eventually need to be explosive if they're going to get to the postseason, when they get to the postseason.
Right, exactly. I think that again, talking about being built to win the Big Ten and being built to go beyond, they were able to do enough of a job of putting JJ in situations that he could be largely successful. And then you go against a ball hawking TCU defense, and they just, we see kind of what happens there, and you get them into a shootout, and that's not necessarily the thing. And Ohio State would love to get in a shootout and then have the defense show up and shut things down. But, for whatever reason, we go back to last year and Ohio State's up a couple points at half. And I remember looking at Tony and it's like, that's not enough. That's not enough. The next 6 minutes of this game are going to mean everything. And we kind of saw what happened then.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm just looking over JJ McCarthy's numbers. Like when he threw the ball over 30 times last year, one was the loss to TCU. Another was a 19-17 win over Illinois down the stretch there. And the other was a 31-10 win at Indiana. So like when he has to throw the ball, they don't really score a lot other than that TCU game. And it's weird. And so they get a lot of their scoring, obviously, from Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, and now I'm interested to see what they look like this year when they realize how good Donovan Edwards is from the start, and if he's healthy enough to do the things that he is capable of doing. Because you look back last year, and there were games where he had two rushes, 3 rushes, 5 rushes, 7 rushes, and then down the stretch, his final 3 games against Ohio State, Purdue, and TCU, he has 70 carries for about 500 yards or so. And it was like the light went on, like, hey, this guy's pretty good. Let's use him even more.
Right.
Of course, and it took Blake Corum to go down for them to basically, we've got this guy too. So I think there's a lot they can do with those 2 guys, but there's only so much you can do running the ball.
Jordan Kapler with a super chat. I guess I have to read this and thank him. I hear hashtag fire Kevin Noon is trending. Just saying.
And I've only retweeted that about 18 times. So that's only 18 tweets for me. So that can't be why it's trending. It's everybody else.
I can't wait until 2024 when Jordan's ire falls on Tom Moore or Alex Gleitman or somebody, because I'm just not strong enough for this right now. Remember we were talking earlier about headspace? Trying to knock me out of my headspace, man. Trying to knock me out of my headspace. Let's get to a question here from Nicholas Hellman. I believe Notre Dame will be better this year, and if we play the way we did against them last year, we may be in trouble. Thoughts? Well, I mean, I think that you're going to be going into a situation once again where Notre Dame is going to be breaking in a new quarterback for them, but certainly somebody who's got a ton of experience. There are certainly some issues with the Fighting Irish. I mean, you lose Lorenzo Styles Jr., who was not necessarily a huge production guy in terms of your offense, but he was probably one of the few that I could name. Michael Mayer is gone. There are a lot of guys. I mean, I just am not convinced that offense is going to be prolific enough. On the defensive side, Isaiah Foskey is gone. Not that Isaiah Foskey had a big game against Ohio State. Brandon Joseph, the player who was in on the hit that knocked JSN out essentially for the season, he's gone. I think it comes down to more of if Ohio State kind of plays choppy, crappy the way that it did last year, that could keep Ohio State close. But the differences are, this is game 4 of the season. This is not game 1 of the season. This will be Ohio State's second road game of the season, opening at Indiana. Yes, you will have a very inexperienced quarterback, whether it's Kyle McCord or Devin Brown. Yes, Ohio State's offensive line isn't magically going to all drink from the healing fountains and suddenly be fantastic. I mean, I think they'll be good, but I don't think that they're going to be Joe Moore Award worthy game 4 of the season. But I don't see necessarily, I don't see these huge gains by Notre Dame outside of certainly at quarterback, which is like a check plus 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 in my book.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how Sam Hartman does there. I agree that the receiving weapons are not great, and they lose a couple of guys, as you mentioned. I mean, Lorenzo Styles was their number 2 guy in terms of catches behind Mayer, and so those 2 guys are both gone. Uh, so Sam Hartman comes in, and you've got some running backs that you've got 3 guys that you can rely on, but again, you've got to be able to stretch the field down through the passing game, and I don't know that maybe Notre Dame has those guys, but I think I'm with you. The biggest point is the fact that this is game 4 for Ohio State, and it was an odd offensive game for Ohio State last year. But I don't know if it's just a CJ Stroud thing or what, because they started oddly in 2021 as well against Minnesota, and I think we should probably just go back and look at the offense from game 4 to game, on game 1 and game 4. And obviously it's opponent dependent as well, but I would expect a much better offense game 4 in terms of they may not score as many points as they do in their second and third games against Western Kentucky and Youngstown State, but I would expect a crisper, more dynamic offense, a more dangerous offense game 4 than game 1 at Indiana.
I want to say hi to Treasure the Torah and everybody else who's come on as of late. We've been on for about 40 minutes. Again, you're watching the Big Me Kickoff. I'm joined by special guest Tony Gerdeman here as we round out into the weekend and talk a little bit of whatever you guys want to talk about. But let me get here to a El Suzabo question. I asked how I guess I missed it the first time. The chat goes quickly at times, and then we get in talking about something and 6 pages go. So apologies if I miss a great question. It happens. I'm hosting and producing. I'm doing the best and watching the cat. I'm doing everything I can. How do they decide who goes to the Big Ten championship from the East if we each have 1 loss? And there's all sorts of supercomputers and abacuses and I think like a big wheel, like on Price is Right. They go through a lot of steps of determining. Okay, I mean, if Ohio State and Michigan each have 1 loss, is a different scenario. If Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State all have 1 loss, so you kind of work your way backwards to shed a team, and then you get down to your last tiebreak. Am I right on that, Tony? I know you've written about it before more than I have.
Yeah, it's
all the specifics. It's a lot of throwing against a wall.
Yeah, and it's also a lot of, when you write about this, it's a lot of cramming for a test, and once the test is over, you forget everything but it's obviously it's head to head, and if Penn State has beaten Michigan, Michigan has beaten Ohio State has beaten Penn State, and you've got this, then you do then it comes down to overall conference record. It's obviously then it's, I think, like your record against the East, which it would all remain the same. Then your record against like the top teams in the West, and then finally, if there's like 7 or 8 tiebreakers, then I think it just comes down to a coin flip. Yeah. At that point, or if you want maybe some ping pong balls in a little lotto machine, and you can come up with it that way. And then or there's also does the FBS CFP rankings get into it? I'm not sure. I think I swear at some point there's a coin flip at the end though.
No. And if CFP rankings were in there, then I don't know how you get to the coin flip at that point, unless what, nobody's ranked. I mean, I don't know at that point. So there's a lot to it. The best answer is win all your games. I mean, is what it comes down to. You don't want it to get into the machine of this tiebreaker and that tiebreaker. And that's also why that Penn State game is going to be so important as well, too, because Penn State's a team that I don't think we necessarily have a great read on. I mean, they're bringing in a new quarterback in Drew Aller. They have a tremendous running game with Nick Singleton and with Katron Allen. Yeah, but they lose a lot on defense. I mean, they have Abdul Carter. I know I've said this before on previous shows. It should be a criminal offense, Ohio State not offering Abdul Carter, but he is far and away their best defensive player. But they take a huge hit in their secondary, losing Jair Brown and Joey Porter Jr. So how quickly are they able to come together is going to, I think, really be the question of where Penn State is in this mix. And then I think as we look at the rest of the East, Michigan State just took a
Ooh.
punch in the face with portal moves at the last second, losing Peyton Thorne, their quarterback, and losing their top receiver. One player did portal and then opted back. I think it was a defensive back, which is good because Michigan State's pass defense has been putrid the last couple of games, so they probably would want to at least have some experienced bodies.
Is it good that he's back then?
I can't remember the player's name, but I don't remember him necessarily being the one that was getting beat all the time. And then, of course, you have wild cards. I mean, what is Maryland going to be like this year? I mean, it's not even so much about the talent that they have, because I'm not convinced that Mike Locksley is a great game day coach. Yeah. I really am not. So, I mean, they could probably have a team beat and then let that team up off the mat, which we've seen.
we have. I think in terms of the East, Michigan gets off lightly by having to go to Penn State on November 11th. So probably won't be the whiteout night game that is a pain to play in. So that helps them. You remember last year, the Big Ten West, at some point with maybe 3 weeks to go, there was a possibility of having a 7-way tie or a 6-way tie. And, I think we can handle a 3-way tie, figure that one out in the Big Ten East. The West, that could just be, it's like undoing your Christmas lights. You put them in the box and you get them out the box and you're trying to untangle them. That's what the Big Ten West is. It's just a box of Christmas lights that have been set in the attic, 11 months out of the year. And then you've got to, oh, shoot, the season's starting, got to get the lights out. And you try to figure out where you got to take Purdue through the loop and bring them around Northwestern. And then you plug them in, you find out one of the bulbs is out, and boom, that's probably Purdue. I don't know. Who's the dim bulb of the Big 12, or the Big Ten West, not Purdue.
It might be Northwestern.
The nerds, yeah, they're probably the worst team. I think Purdue. Keep an eye on Purdue this year. I like Hudson Card.
Has a new head coach. They've gone in. They go and get Hudson Card from Texas via the portal. They're going to be hard to read. I think the whole West is going to be hard to read. And every year, I sit there and I do a piece where I go through the entire schedule for the upcoming season and pick winners and losers. And then I never go back and revisit it because I've done such a horrible job. And even if my rankings are pretty close, I go in, it's like, how the heck did I pick whoever to beat Purdue in this one? I don't understand what's going to happen there, but every year I fall into the trap. The banana in the tailpipe. Oh, this is going to be the year Nebraska's going to turn it around. Well, with Matt Rule there and Scott Frost out, is this going to be the year? I mean, they certainly have had to have a little bit of a roster makeover, and it's fine for a new coach coming in somewhere and turning around a program that has a lot of talent on its roster. I'm willing to debate how much talent is on the Nebraska roster currently. I mean, and that's in terms of what we saw in 22. I know that they've not been timid in making moves in the portal as well.
Yeah, and remember, Purdue goes and gets the Illinois defensive coordinator to be their head coach. How is Illinois able to do that? And then you see the guys that got drafted from that defense, and if they can get some of that at Purdue with the offense that they always have and that they will continue to have with the passing game that they're going to have, I just think it's an interesting program to watch. It's always an entertaining brand of football as opposed to the Northwestern, which is not.
I mean, even in the years that they've won the West, I mean, it's not necessarily been a Northwestern team that has been pleasing to the eye. I mean, they've just gutted it out and gotten it done, and that's a testimony to what Pat Fitzgerald's been able to do there. But I don't think that they've come out of out of hibernation since they lost their defensive coordinator, that Mike Hankelwitz. I think the last time that they played Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, I think that was Hankewitz's final season. And we were getting to a point. It's like, well, even years are going to be good years for Northwestern. Well, 22 surely wasn't, and 23 last time I checked it's not an even number. And I think it's going to be interesting the next year, 2, 3 years. How patient is Pat Fitzgerald going to be with his situation at Northwestern? How patient is Northwestern going to be with Pat Fitzgerald? I mean, they're not going to be able to do better, but that has not stopped Kansas or Minnesota from getting rid of coaches that have been relatively successful and we can do better, and then it not necessarily being the case. Kansas finally starting to turn it around, and I'm not a big PJ Fleck guy, but as somebody posted in the chat, Minnesota is always around 750 in terms of its list. I mean, I get exhausted watching the dude. I really do.
Yeah, just watching him, you can get your steps in.
It's horrible. It's horrible. Neil Harris, is the NC2A going to allow schools to add more coaches? To be determined.
Yeah, I mean, it was supposed to happen, then it got shelved. So I don't know if they meet again this summer to talk about when they might do it again, but I don't think it's happening this year.
Yeah, I would really doubt that they would have a situation in there. And honestly, it's got to be the big schools that want this more so than the little schools, because the big schools have the huge budgets, and you would be able to sit there and throw the money around. And it's not to say that there are not analysts who are making good money right now. I don't necessarily know what Todd Fitch is making off the top of my head. I don't know what James Laurinaitis is making off the top of my head in his, what is he considered, QC? I mean, I don't even know what he
GA.
GA. I mean, well, then he ain't making squat as a GA really, but it's if you're a small team, and I'm not even going to say like a bottom of the Big Ten, I'm going to say if you are a bottom of the group of 5 and you have to sit there and do buy games every year to be able to keep the lights on in the building and keep your team outfitted in uniforms and helmets and shoulder pads and everything else, are you going to be able to get into some sort of match where you're bringing in, where you have the option to bring in unlimited coaches or 5 coaches or whatever? Whereas at Ohio State, Alabama, UGA, places like that, that's, just means a little bit more money. Let's go through Gene's sofa one more time and see if there's any $100 bills that fell out.
You can make money now as a GA. I do have the terms if you want to take a guess on how much Todd Fitch makes as the senior advisor offensive analyst.
Well, you see, now you've already weighted me to sit there, and it's like whatever low number I was going to throw out there that I need to add up, but I still think I'm going to stay low. I'm going to say 450.
250.
Huh?
250.
250. That's where I wanted to go. But I was thinking of what one of the lowest, what the low end of the 10 coaches of where they are, and I wanted to put it kind of equal there.
Yeah, Keenan Bailey is the lowest at 400 in terms of the full-time coaches. Would you like to take a crack at James Laurinaitis' salary this year?
125.
142. And do you want to continue on to the Mark Pantoni, Quinn Temple route and take?
Sure. I think Pantoni's doing pretty well. I think he's around 4, isn't he?
334.
Okay, all right.
And
Mark, if you're watching, hello.
He should be paid more. And then Chief of Staff Quinn Temple,
270.
260, pretty good. And then the last one here, General Manager of Football Operations, Volt.
Well, Volt has been there since the Meyer years, so he's probably got some stuff on longevity and everything else. I'll say 310.
258.
258.
And it's a good livings. I think John Cooper's first salary was it like $100,000 a year, something like that back in like 88 or something like that. I was doing some research a long time ago, and just surprise, the guys are making more money today than they were 35 years ago. Who knew? Nobody else in the industry is.
Well, and the thing is that I think that while the job of head coach of drawing up X's and O's and doing that is still there. I think there's so much more ancillary crap that is there now than was there 35 years ago. Um, every phone call you got to worry about what's going on, social media, NIL, transfer portal, this, that, the other. And I think that everybody's probably got a much shorter leash, just based on the dollar figures that are out there. I mean, we're not going to see a lot of the coaches that spend 35 years in a program anymore. That's just not going to be the case. I mean, I was even going to just sit there and say Bobby Bowden, but not all of Bobby Bowden's career was at FSU. But I don't think we're going to see a lot of that anymore. And I think we're probably not going to see a lot of coaches who are still in the younger side, coach until they're in their mid 70s. I think that the candle is going to burn bright, it's going to burn hot, and it's going to not burn long. I think is really where we're going to be at.
Then because you'll have guys who say you're a head coach for 10 years and they're like, do I really want to put in all these hours, all of these stresses when I've got 80 million in the bank? Because I assume you just keep it in the bank. You put checking, I assume. Like there at that point, you've got enough. Is you want to spend time, you want to watch your kids grow up, that sort of thing, because you don't get to see them. And all of this money, it's crazy. Like 45, 50 years ago, you have like Michigan's AD arguing that they don't want to put the games on TV because that keeps people from coming to the games. Like the administrators used to argue for like fewer TV games. And back in my day, like in high school, that Ohio State could only be on TV, like teams could only be on TV like 5 times a season nationally. And now, as of like, I don't know, 20 years ago, every game is pretty much on national television, and the money's got to go somewhere. And for as much money as I don't fault any coaching salaries, because as much money as the programs bring in, it's earned by most people. Maybe I could fault some Ferentz salaries. I'll say that.
Well, I was going to say there are certainly some coaches nationally that you kind of wonder why they're making as much as they are or whatever. But I mean, it's a tough job. I mean, and there's a lot that goes into it and everything. But you're right. I mean, about where TV has gone, and now, I mean, it used to be that the territorial footprint meant so much more because how are you going to see Ohio State and Indiana, if you're not here. And then we went to like the mirrored, where like you would either get the game on ABC or ESPN2, and now we don't even have any of that split mirror stuff going on. It'll be interesting this year, and that brings us to a good topic as the board kind of, or the chat, sorry, playing my Buckeye Huddle card right there. The board fights with itself a little bit with Antoine taking on multiple people there. But what are you looking forward to finding out about this upcoming television contract starting this year with NBC, CBS, and strangely, no ABC, ESPN to be heard?
Yeah, and we're going to start to see the first few weeks of the season announced at some point this month in terms of the broadcast. I would love to be able to like witness the college football game draft, but apparently it takes weeks and it's like done over emails and phone calls, so there's really nothing to watch. But I'm one of those nerds that I enjoy finding out about when games are on, and I because I've already like envisioned what a Big Ten Saturday can be like, especially once USC and UCLA get here with it. It starts at noon, and you have a game at noon, 3:30, 7:30, 10:30. Like you just go all day long with Big Ten, and you just jump from network to network. So I do wonder how CBS is going to handle it this year, because they have the SEC and the Big Ten. So there's going to be some movement there, and maybe how the NBC is going to handle it with Peacock and the Big Ten, where is Ohio State going to be on Peacock for the Youngstown State game, something like that?
I mean, there's certainly the argument that could be made. I remember when ESPN2 started and they put a Duke Carolina men's basketball game on the Deuce, and living in a fraternity house that really didn't even have cable, if we're being honest. I mean, it was there was a lot of anger that went on with that. I think I actually ended up, I'm not even kidding, watching the game at the All-in-One because there were TVs at the All-in-One, the Kentucky Hut it was a Taco Bell, uh, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Pizza Hut. And then they also added All-in-One, which was like just really bad burgers. But they had TVs there and I just sat there and just like slowly ate and watched the game because I didn't know where else to go to watch it. But it'll be interesting to see how that works. And I want to bring up Philip Pulio's question about what do you think about the Big 12's XFL style broadcasting idea? I hate it myself. I'm not familiar with what Philip is talking about. Is that something? Are you familiar?
I heard them talking about this, I think, on Sirius the other day, where the suggestion was like the Big 12 might allow viewers to hear what the coaches and things are saying, which there is no, I can't foresee coaches actually allowing that. But I also wonder, would coaches even have a say in it? And, because like I guess I haven't watched much of the XFL, but the coaches are mic'd, and so there's some broadcasting of that stuff that goes on, and the suggestion is Big 12 was talking about maybe doing something like that as well to gain some eyeballs. And I can't imagine a coach that would be in favor of that.
Oh
But as
no.
I said, I don't know if they would even have a say. And then if you are mic'd, you're not saying anything, and now you're hampered. Like I just don't see that working.
No, I mean, remember during the basketball season, like on FS1, there was the game where Chris
Mhm.
Holtman was mic'd up,
Mhm.
and I talked to somebody close to the program who said that even before the game, that Chris Holtman was angry and lamenting the fact of quote unquote, why in the bleep did I even agree to this bleep? So I guess there is a level of agreement, but I think still, I don't think that you can just I don't think you can just summarily mandate it and it's like, well, this is what we're doing. Um,
Would it be like
Now
maybe like
I think what you could do is you could sit there and be like, okay, if we're going to do this on this platform and like this 3:30 window on this channel is going to be the mic'd up channel is going to be your behind the scenes or whatever. I mean, maybe they can just keep you out of that window or something, but that I don't know. I don't know how the heck that would work.
maybe it's like for this 6 minute stretch, at the 14-minute mark of the second quarter to the 8-minute mark of the second quarter, whatever, like be aware that we will be listening and broadcasting some of that. Something where it's just a segment. It's not the entire game. It's just one portion where, okay, coach, the coach would know that and be reminded that we're listening in now. Maybe it would be something like that as opposed to just freely broadcasting. Because if I remember the Ohio State, it wasn't constant. It was it. I mean, they were mic'd the entire time, but there was actually broadcasting that was going on as well.
I think that was actually a game I went to, and I just
Oh,
don't remember. I just remember people losing their minds on social, and then I talked to somebody a couple few days after the game, and they relayed that story to me, which I just loved. I mean, because we're now into this point of where let's talk to the baseball manager between the second and third
mhm.
inning or whatever, and it's obviously been taped or whatever. It's during the changeover or whatever, or oh, we're gonna pull this coach aside here at this point. I don't know. I don't think we gain any insight from it. I mean, it certainly does give a sideline person something to do, but I don't know what the net gain is out of it other than annoying team personnel or something.
Yeah, and as we know, when you're annoying a coach, it's not you're never going to get the best answer from him. And I've always I just assume when we've seen these the last couple of years that they extend the timeouts to allow for the coach to go and talk with the person. Like what you see it on basketball all the time now. So I assume like to keep so that it's not unfair. You get your full timeout, but we're going to extend it like 30 seconds so that we can pull the coach away or something like that. Because it just uh, in-game action like that, and I don't really gain anything from it. But I'm also a passive viewer. Like I'm on my laptop a lot, and sports is just on the background for me. So I'm probably not the best person in terms of like paying attention to color commentary or the broadcast. there are probably other better people at something than me at something.
We're going to wrap up here with this last question, of course, unless we get a super chat to keep us here. But I can't wait until Pac-12 moves to Ion and I can watch games between episodes of Columbo and NCIS. I mean, there's all sorts of rumors out there. I mean, USA Network, which did okay with some wrestling on it for a while and everything else. CW had been mentioned, I guess CW. I don't know why I wanted to call it UPN, but I guess WB and UPN merged to create the CW. I just, I all the talk about where Pac-12 is in terms of its deal, I just can't imagine the longer that it goes, the better that it's going to be, because the Pac-12 is going to get more desperate. Teams are going to get more froggy. Universities are going to get more froggy about what this is. And while the new Big Ten commissioner comes out and essentially says, we're not going to be the ones to pop the Pac-12 balloon, even though you really did by bringing in, your predecessor did by bringing in SC and UCLA. But damn it, if that piñata breaks, we're grabbing that candy. I mean, it was kind of what I took from it. And I'm using an ample amount of poetic license there, but ESPN comes out and or they don't come out, but there's a report of them saying that they are not interested in the tier 1 rights. And then I read something else from like SI saying that's not entirely true, but I just can't imagine there being a lot of meat on the bone once this deal comes to pass. And okay, you're making the same amount of money you made on the old deal, minus 2 teams, whatever. When everybody else makes more, if you're staying steady, you're losing in that point.
As you're talking about all of these networks, I'm wondering, well, the Pac-12, like I'm one of the people who actually gets the Pac-12 network. I don't watch it, but I see it on my guide. Do you know what Spike TV is now?
Spike didn't become the Nashville network that became
first. It was the Nashville network.
All right, and then it was Spike. No, I don't know what it is right now.
Now it is the Paramount Network, not to be confused with the United Paramount Network, which was UPN. I just had to look that up because I wondered what happened to Spike. It only went out of business in 2018. Seems like a long time ago. Seems like a lot.
I could have sworn I could have sworn there were, and I'm sure I'm wrong, but I could have sworn there was one more stop before that point, but maybe not.
That's what I thought, but I'm looking at Wikipedia here, and it starts with the Nashville network from 83 to 2000. Then it was the National Network from 2000 to 2003 when it had some wrestling there. Then it was Spike until 2018, and then the Paramount Network 2018 to present.
Well, there you go. Well, folks, we've made it almost an hour and 10 minutes with you on there. Sorry to no sell it. I don't know what to say there. I mean, the Pac-12 deal, what is the best that they could hope for?
They have to get it with ESPN.
Right. And ESPN is going through another round of job cuts. And now what your infrastructure salary is in terms of what you're paying employees is different than what you're paying in, for distribution and everything else. But I don't see a scenario of, unless the Pac-12 can convince them on a game of the week. Here you go. We'll carry one. And then there was one. We'll carry the one big game, and then everything else falls to these other channels. But I don't know. Let's just say that you do that and you manage to squeak out another couple $1 million per school. Is that necessarily going to get you there? You can sign the shortest of deals, but then they're just going to be back in the same situation of where they're a conference that's, who's the bell cow? Who is the attraction? Colorado right now. If you already have SC and UCLA out the door, what's the attraction? For Joe normal fan, it's probably going to be Dion at Colorado more so than what Utah has done here recently in its success. And there's going to be the people who are going to like Oregon, and there's going to be the people who are going to like Washington. But I'm not getting all of that excited about Cal Arizona State. I'm just not.
Well, and will Will Colorado be a sell next year after a 2-10 season this year? That. So I think the game of the week on ESPN at 10:30 on Saturday night is probably the way to go. Then you sell the rest of your inventory somewhere else. Whether it's if you want to go CW at that point or wherever. But if you drop off of ESPN and you're not on 3 other networks like the Big Ten, just go ahead and end things because you will not exist to ESPN.
Conference Kevorkian. You heard it here, folks. Conference Kevorkian.
2 Ks.
I was going to say, I don't know if I can end on such a dark note right there. So, but the questions have kind of worn out. I know that I want to get on and finish up my Friday and get here into the weekend. Got a football camp that we'll be going to in Obetz on Sunday. A lot of top targets will be there, so I'm looking forward to that. You got any big lunch plans? We'll talk about lunch and then we'll end because that way we're ending on a high note.
No, just just a turkey sandwich on toast. That's what I'm planning. But I am looking forward to Obetz, the camp on Sunday. I've actually never been to Obetz, and I've never been to this place. There's a lot of places in Columbus, the areas of Columbus I've never been, so I can check this one off the list. Get to see Mylan Graham. I'm looking forward to that.
Shocking that you had Obetz on any sort of list. And if you ever have to go pick up a package from the UPS from like its main Columbus hub, that is an Obetz. So that was the first time I've been to Obetz. And then I've been to Fortress Obetz a couple times for football events, but certainly the crew used to do a lot of stuff there before they got their training facilities. So there you go. But folks, I want to thank Tony for being part of the show. This is kind of a last second deal, so it means a lot that I didn't have to sit there and ramble on for an hour 10. I was able to push about 70% off it onto Tony, much like my work at Buckeye Huddle.
And then I'll get a text from Kevin complaining that I didn't get to talk enough.
Hold on a second. There we go. That's better. But until next time, folks, I want to thank you for watching. We'll talk to you very soon and have a wonderful weekend.